right, we are live.
Hey.
Hey guys, welcome to the trade episode 34. We are discussing today fan art, conventions, legalities thereof, copyright infringement. I mean, it's going to be a bit of a big topic today. Unfortunately, it's just myself and Jake from Modest Medusa.
Hello.
Hi, Jake. And my name's Melony. I do ornamental at ornamentalcomic.com. Jake over there does Modest Medusa at modestmedusa.com. Yay! I remember names and stuff. Yeah, doing this for 3 years now. I should remember, but now, no.
Well, you know, forgetting things is I can't talk. Never mind. At the class I teach last night, I was telling my students who I've had in the class for like 5 weeks now that I can't remember any of their names, and that's probably not going to change for as long as I know them. So, yeah, memory is hard.
Sometimes it is. Apologies, guys. I do have a bit of a chest cold. I'm trying to get over it, so a bit of coughing, sniffling, and or water taking is going to occur here. But anyways, me and Jake, we were talking about specifically recently about conventions and how more and more of them are cracking down on fan art, because fan art basically is infringing on copyright. Now, I've been going through some different forums and having some different discussions with other people online about this, and several people have voiced, well, fair use is out there, and that's one of those real gray, fuzzy areas. Chris Oatley recently put it best in the use of any type of character. Do you own the character in question? Yes. Do whatever you please. No. You have no legal right to profit from the work featuring the characters without permission from copyright holders. And you have no right to create such works, not for profit either.
Which is, I didn't know that last part at all. And that's really interesting to me.
Yeah. It's basically a very black and white take on it, but it's the easiest way to also interpret it. Now, like I said, there's a bunch of gray, fuzzy area all the way around copyright and around trademark. And trademark is different from copyright. Trademark, you have to constantly use and prove. Copyright, current law, now this is of October 2015. Copyright has always been, generally speaking, since it was set down, whatever you made from the time of creation on until your death, plus 70 years from the time you die, your whoever inherits your estate can still profit off of your work. Now, that's always been in debate and fuzziness because, for instance, Marvel, DC, and Disney specifically are known for going through lawsuits about changing copyright law because Walt Disney's been dead for a long time now.
Right.
But since it's his corporation that owns the copyright now instead of him, that's where some of that fuzziness comes in. But specifically, where we're going to focus today on conventions. A lot of conventions, New York Comic Con has been rumored. Fanimation, they've actually occasionally sent around some cease and desist, but they've got a two-edged sword with their take on their use of their works in like artist alleys and whatnot. Basically, for instance, we were making a good example. Jake's character, Medusa. If she dresses up as a copyrighted character, it's considered a parody. So he can draw Medusa dressed up as Deadpool, for instance, run around acting like a silly shit. But
I'm trying to find an example here, by the way.
Generally speaking, that's considered parody, and that is covered by law, and that's fine. But if he tries to go and draw Deadpool himself and start reproducing and selling the work repeatedly, that's straight up copyright infringement. You are stepping on the toes of Marvel and Disney.
Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people argue with that. I have several really good friends who are really against copyright laws as they stand now. They think copyright laws should be changed. They should be changed to allow people to do more stuff. I don't really have strong feelings about that. I'm perfectly content with the idea that if I create a character, nobody else should be able to profit from that character, and likewise, because Marvel has created Captain America or Disney has, Donald Duck, I should not be able to profit from those. I'm totally okay with that idea. That being said, I do like to draw other people's characters sometimes, and while my intent when I'm doing that is not to make money off those characters, sometimes I do make money off those characters, and I don't see this as a gray area. Like you said before, it's very black and white. We're not allowed to do these things, or we are allowed to do these things. And so my approach to this has always been that if I end up making money off a character, like for example, if I did a Donald Duck print, which I've never done, but let's say I did a Donald Duck print and I took it to a convention and I was selling it. If somebody from Disney said, hey, don't do that, I would automatically 100% stop doing it. And if they asked me for the money from whatever profits I made from it, I would not want to give it to them because I don't have a lot of money, but I feel like they would be completely within their rights.
Right.
All of that said, it doesn't mean I actually want to stop making my Donald Duck print. Or it wouldn't stop me from then necessarily going and making like a Tron print or something, which is a weird, not legal gray area, but it's kind of a moral gray area because I still want to do these things. I still want to draw. I'm a huge fan of Legend of Korra. I make a Legend of Korra fan comic, which and we were just talking about a few minutes ago. And I still want to draw my fan comic, and it's explicitly a fan comic. But I've crossed a weird line recently where I've started printing it. In just a second, I have a copy of it here. So I've started printing these comics, and I take them to conventions with me. And I sell them for like basically what I pay for them to print. They cost me about $3 to print. I sell them for $4. And that doesn't feel wrong to me. I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong. But like you said, it's completely black and white. I'm not supposed to do that.
But you're also not doing the majority of your profit off of that either.
No, yeah, that's the other thing. I always feel like it's a mistake, right? As an artist who's trying to cultivate my own property, as an artist who's trying to make Modest Medusa its own thing and trying to live off of Modest Medusa, I feel like it's a mistake for me to focus on other characters. I feel like that dilutes my brand and it dilutes what I'm doing. And I feel like that's a major problem. And I feel like doing fan art and selling that at symptoms or at conventions is a symptom of the problem, in that we want to be making a living off of our original characters. We want to be making a living off of the comics we make that are about the things we created. But you go to a convention and you're competing with so many other people. And the conventions right now are so incredibly jam-packed that when you get there, you go and you're sitting next to whoever, and you end up selling like 4 books or 8 books or 10 books or like 4 mini comics, and it's not enough. So next time you go, you think, well, I'll bring a few prints. I'll bring a Captain America print. I'll bring, a Twilight print. Twilight print, I have no idea why. But you bring whatever's popular. You do your Crystal Gem art. Whatever you think is going to sell, right? And I have a whole bunch of sketches for Steven Universe stuff.
I love Steven Universe. I sketch it all the time.
I do.
But, yeah,
Yeah, but you bring this stuff to the convention, and then that ends up selling really well, and you sell like 20 or 30 or 50 prints, you know, that kind of stuff. And then you only sell like 4 or 5 of your own things, and then the next time you think, why am I wasting time doing my own thing when nobody buys it and nobody cares, but I always sell out of all these prints, or I'll make, you know, $800 selling prints and like $40 selling my own stuff. And then before you know it, you're one of the people who is going to conventions and just selling prints of Deadpool and My Little Pony, and you're not selling your own stuff anymore. And even if you're offering your own book off to the side, nobody cares. And you're not building your brand and you're not expanding your audience. And you can do that for 5 years. You can do that for 3 years. You can do that for a year. But at the end of that time, you may have made some money, but you haven't built anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But on the flip side, you made some money. And that's important because all of us are dirt poor.
Yeah. Yeah. We honestly are. Most of us are hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck. You know,
well, here's the thing. Most of us work harder than anybody else would know. Here in Portland, we have a group that gets together in Southeast Portland, which is made up of all webcomic people. And to a person, we all work, in addition to whatever day job we have, we all work 30 or 40 or 50 extra hours a week on our comics. And for most of us, I'm one of the very, very lucky people in my group who's actually making an okay amount of money on my comic. And by okay, I mean I'm making something like $900 a month on my comic. And that's, on one hand, that's fantastic. I'm so happy about that. On the other hand, that is a tiny amount of money for what is 50 or 60 hours a week worth of work.
Yes.
Yeah. And the idea that you can supplement that by going to the myth that you can go to a convention and you can sell your books and you can make a lot of money is in fact a myth. That's true for a few people, but I don't think comic book conventions are viable in that way for most people who make comics.
I would say about 95% that go to a con do not even break even.
Yeah, no, it's totally true, and that's becoming worse and worse. I used to break even at a minimum at every con I went, and for a lot of cons, I would go to a convention, and that would be like 2 months worth of income for me. And in the last year, that's just plummeted. And at first, I thought it was because nobody cared about my comic anymore, but talking to more and more people, it seems like that's the case for everybody. And the people who are doing well at conventions are the people with the giant print walls full of Deadpool prints and My Little Pony prints. And I don't want to hate them for that, because that's totally within their right and they're making money and that's great. But I feel like the more of that we have, the more people who are focusing on making non-original stuff, the harder it is for those of us who are making original content to make money at these venues.
Yeah, see, in general, I believe that cons starting to break down, including the big name companies, just being very polite about going around, maybe handing out some cease and desist, or maybe just going and talking to people saying, you know what, I'm sorry, majority of what you're selling is my copyrighted work. You know, you need to take it down. I think is overall good. I
think it's overall good as well, and I think it's going to hurt a lot of people.
In the short term, I see it hurting somebody's sales. In the long term, it's better for everybody within art, comics, and general media.
I agree, and I think that's going to be a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people who are making. I mean, I know several people who make their living doing the print wall. Just sitting up their wall of 50 or 60 prints and selling their prints for 3 for $15 or 3 for $20. And they'll go to a show and they'll make, $3,000 at a show. And that's how they make their living. And and not because their work isn't beautiful, not because their work isn't amazing. If you looked around the studio I have here, I have so much work on my wall from people who do this for a living, but it's all work from licensed characters. Very, very little of it is original content. And as beautiful as their work is, the people who are approaching them aren't approaching them because they absolutely love their work and they value their work, or some of them are, but not. The people who are approaching them because they want a picture of Deadpool. They came to the convention for something with Deadpool on it, and it doesn't matter if it's good, it doesn't matter if it's bad. They're willing to pay $15 or $20 or $5 or whatever for a picture of Deadpool, or for a picture of Batgirl, or for whatever. And the print wall takes advantage of that, I think. Yeah. And that doesn't mean it's a bad thing morally, but it means it makes it harder for the rest of us. And I think in the long run, unless those artists are then building their notoriety to move on to a freelance art career, which I assume some of them are, but I don't think many of them are. They're not building their own characters. They're not building their own series. They're not establishing work which they can then carry into the future.
Yes, it's exactly it. Overall, I think it actually lessens the credibility of not only the popular character, but of the original, that is coming out.
Yeah, sure.
Somebody else. Overall, I think it honestly hurts everybody. I know in the short run, it's a kick in the teeth for quite a few of these people, but maybe they need to go ahead and rethink their moral stance on it. I know it's currently paying the bills, but in the long run, you're hurting yourself, and you're hurting everybody else.
I think so too, and I really, really, really do think that. And I hate to sound greedy about it, but I especially think the "you're hurting everybody else" thing is really true. It does really make it difficult. Or, for example, back in August, a few friends and I went down to Salem, Oregon for Northwest Comic Fest, which was a first-year show. Tiny show, well run. Nobody showed up for it, but it was well run. And I'm looking forward to going back next year. I hope the more people will come. Anyway, out of the, let's say, 100 vendors there, it was a comic book convention. It was explicitly labeled as a comic book convention. Out of the 100-ish people there were maybe 2 other people who were actually selling comics of any kind. And then, but there were 30 or 40 people who just had walls of prints. And that's fine. That's what sells. But I feel like conventions, unless it's specifically a indie convention, a convention focusing on small press stuff, I feel like conventions are turning into a weird combination of print wall and D-list celebrity, and anything else is just a novelty. And I know, and some people like that. That's what some people want. But I feel like that's killing comic book conventions.
Spike, she was talking about this on her podcast, Dirty Old Ladies. They were talking about conventions, and she specified that she won't go to a con anymore if the majority of what they've got listed for, like, their guests, for instance, are all celebrities. They're all movie celebrities and stuff, and they're not more focused on comics and the like. Even if they give her a free, pass, a lot of times she'll turn them down.
Yeah. I was just invited to Wizard World here in Portland at the beginning of next year, and I haven't gone the last 2 years just because I don't feel like it's a good show for me. I don't want to say it's a bad show. It's just not a good show for me. But the first year they had it in town, I did go, and the weird thing that happened was myself and Barry Deutsch, who is my studio mate, who's not here at the moment, but he usually sits right there, were the only people selling comics at the entire show. And we were in this weird situation where people would come in and they would pay, $30 or $40 to get in. And they would then get their autograph with John Cena or whoever. Henry Winkler was there. I remember that. They kept announcing Henry Winkler's name over and over again. So they'd pay another $50 to get their autograph. And then by that point, they've spent almost $100. And then they look around and they realize there's nothing else to do at the show. And so they wander around and they wander around. They're like, where are the comics? And the thing we heard over and over again is, you guys are the only people who have comics. We thought this was about comics. Where are the comics? And there's this illusion that when you show up, it's like, oh, there's all these celebrities. There's all these, like, there's this bunch of big fancy stuff happening. But when you actually get into the show, there's nothing happening. And so we were in the weird position where people were just buying everything we had just because we were the only people there. But then the next year, which I didn't go to, but several friends did, they had went out of their way to invite more comic people, but that wasn't the focus. They were just filling space, and the whole thing was just messy and gross.
Yeah, see, all I've heard from Wizard Worlds, and I mean in general, not just, ones in particular, but just in general, they're terrible for comics. Just absolutely terrible, and they're poorly ran, generally speaking.
Yeah, I don't want to say.
general-
I don't want to say anything super negative about them because they invited me to the show, but
But this
I
is just
agree.
the general consensus that I have heard from
That's
others.
the general consensus I hear as well, and I think they're getting kind of a bad reputation. What I hope they do is I hope they change their focus. To me, it doesn't seem like this model is sustainable. To me, it seems like people are going to start burning out on this model really quickly. We have a show here in town called the Rose City Comic Con, which is pretty much it's not the same thing. It's a better show than that, but it has the same kind of focus. A lot of celebrities, a lot of stuff that sounds really exciting before you get there, but when you get there, there's just not a lot of content. And what there is all these giant print walls. And God, I really sound like I'm really down on the people who make prints, and I'm not, because there's often beautiful work, and I certainly buy a lot of it. But all right, I think it's a matter of opinion. I think when I go to a comic book convention, what I want to find people who are doing neat, amazing things, who are making amazing comics, or who are producing amazing art, or who are doing something else that I can't really see anywhere else. And sometimes I also want to buy a print. Sometimes I also want to buy, a Legend of Korra print, or God, even a Deadpool print. But mostly that's not what I want. And it may be that I am taking what I want and projecting it on everybody else, which isn't really fair. But fuck, I think that's what comic conventions should be. I think comic conventions should be about comics and about the people who make comics, and not necessarily about, who has the coolest Captain America keychains, or who has the biggest and most colorful Steven Universe print.
No, it's just become very what I like to call the candy shell.
Yeah, okay.
They give you this pretty candy shell. We're gonna have John Cena, and maybe Stan Lee's actually gonna be there, and this and that, maybe Joss Whedon, and blah blah blah. And but it's a candy shell, and when you get in there, 9/10 of it is nothing but fluff. And prints, when it's just prints and it's just your giant print wall, that's fluff, guys. It's not to be rude. It's not to be disrespectful. I love the art. I've got an absolute ton of it myself. I still buy it, but I actually focus more on originals because, again, that's me personally. That's me personally. We are probably more in the minority. Yeah.
So I wonder about that. I wonder if, because we create this kind of content, if that really biases us against what the majority of people actually want.
I don't think so, because we're still in the general buying bracket to begin with.
That's right.
Don't get me wrong. I still go buy the occasional Deadpool, Captain America thing, but most of the time it's a parody work that I buy.
Yeah.
I bought a bunch of stickers from you at that one point that had all the little parodies of different characters with Medusa dressed up as them. That was really cute. I have them all over everything.
Can I talk about that for a sec?
Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like there's something that Dave Sims said years and years ago, which is that when he was at conventions, people would ask him to draw like Captain America or Spawn or whatever, and he would always say, "No, absolutely not. But I will draw Cerebus dressed as those characters." And the idea was that, like we were talking about before, if you just spend your time creating art of other people's characters, then you're not building anything for yourself. But he really believed that if he spent time, that if every time somebody said, "Hey, will you draw this other thing for me?" if he incorporated his own stuff into it, it would help him. It would help him. It would get people familiar with his character, and when people saw him again, they would remember that, and then they would buy his thing as opposed to asking for something else. And I wasn't sure how viable that was, but I started doing my Medusa I don't have any examples here, but I started dressing my Medusa in costumes and doing the stickers, as you know, and also doing prints, which I also don't have any. I should have all these examples I can hold up, but I don't. And I feel like that helps. I feel like when I have my table and people could come up and they can look at my stickers and they can say, "Oh, I recognize her. She's dressed as the Doctor. She's dressed as Cyclops. She's dressed as Sailor Moon." and they can see that, and they can take that home with them for $1, or they can take home a print of, Medusa and Sherlock arguing for $5. And then next time I see them at a new convention, they remember me, and they are very likely to buy one of my books. And I feel like that is much more to my service, that is of much more value to me than just drawing a picture of Sherlock by himself and trying to sell that.
Right.
And I feel like that's a viable way to provide people with this kind of need for pop culture characters, and to take, I hate to say it, but to take advantage of other people's characters and other people's copyright. On the same side, it's something I always feel a little gross about, because every time somebody comes up and they're like, "Oh, I love Sailor Moon," what I'm hearing and what they're saying is, "I love Sailor Moon. I don't give a shit about your character." And why should they? But I want them to give a shit about my character.
Right. But it's a way to introduce your character along with their Sailor Moon love.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, it's a segue.
If anybody's looking for some more information on this, there are 2 resources I've got for everybody, and I'll put them down on the doobly-doo with links just in case. But Stanford University actually put up a website specifically about copyright and fair use privileges, and actually they keep it updated. It's fairuse.stanford.edu. And there's actually was a lawyer at one point at Comic-Con a couple years back that did a video, and they put it up on YouTube there. You can just Google fan art law at Comic-Con. You should be able to find it. But I'll, like I said, I'll put the links down below. But they get pretty specific. Look, it's pretty black and white. But overall, I think it's fine to sell prints. But at the same time, I don't think that should dominate your table. I just, if it's, let's say, Jake, you've got your print wall. Majority of it's Medusa, but there are 1 or 2 pieces of maybe some doodles you did of Wonder Woman, Deadpool, up there. Yeah, they'll probably let that slide. But if 9/10 of that wall and what you're selling is Wonder Woman, Deadpool, and whatnot, yeah, I think they have the right to slap it down.
I think so too. I was at Ape a few weeks ago down in San Jose, which was a really nice show, by the way. And I was selling my Legend of Korra comic. And about halfway through the show, somebody comes up to me, and it was selling like hotcakes, by the way. It was great. Like, I wasn't selling anything else. Nobody cared about my Medusa books, but people were picking up the Legend of Korra comic left and right, which is actually, now that I think about it, I was really excited about that. But now that I think about it, that's kind of a shitty thing, because that's exactly the problem I was talking about. They're picking up this Legend of Korra comic. They don't care about my other stuff. Anyway, somebody came by and they said, somebody from Nickelodeon is here, and they're going around table to table. And it turns out they weren't there handing out cease and desist letters. They were there for a completely different reason, and they were just looking around. But it terrified me. I was so sure somebody was going to come by and say, "You have to take that off the table," which I would have immediately. But in my mind, I'm ready to do that. But faced with the reality of it is really different.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's a moral issue as well as a basic law issue. Most of us don't mind making fan art because, let's face it, it's at least good practice,
Oh, yeah.
And we've got plenty of love. Steven Universe here.
Well, yeah. And when you're doing something you love, that's fun. And I doubt anybody wants to. I doubt anybody is sitting at Cartoon Network saying we have to stop people from making Steven Universe art because we don't want them to do something they love. I mean, it does come down to money.
Yeah, it comes down to money. I mean, most of them look the other way because it's promoting the brand. It is.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's, like I said, if it just dominates almost the entirety of what you're making and doing, then yeah, I'm sorry, you're gonna need to back off there.
Yeah. Well, is it a respect issue? I mean, I hate to say it, but when I see somebody who has the giant print wall of characters, or their merchandise is mostly like Nintendo pixel art stuff or something like that, I might admire the quality of their work. I might think they did really beautiful work, but it's hard for me. God, this is going to sound awful. This is going to sound fucking awful. It's hard for me to respect them as an artist, because what I want to say is, this is beautiful. You're doing beautiful work. Why the fuck aren't you doing beautiful work with original content of your own? Why aren't you birthing something new and interesting into the world instead of just doing, Street Fighter art?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know if everybody feels that way. And certainly not everybody feels that way, but I'm very curious if other artists feel that way.
Yeah, well, like I said, the majority of what I've done in research and whatnot, majority actually feel that way, at least from all the reading I've done. Now, this is from more of the industry side.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm basically low-level beginner industry, I still consider myself on the industry side.
Mm-hmm.
But just about everybody I know of pretty much poo-poos on it and frowns on it, because, listen, you've got more important things to do than to be just making Sailor Moon fan art,
Sure. So I wonder if that's the way the normal consumer, the average consumer sees it, who I think is, for the most part, unaware of these issues, or if not unaware of them, then they're very low on their priority list. For example, the same people who will. All right. So let me tell you a quick story. A few years ago, one of my students was recommending a anime to me. And she said, you can watch it. And so I went home and I Googled it, and I couldn't find an official release for it. And she was like, well, you watch it on this site. And I was like, oh, that's a pirate site. And she was like, it's not a pirate site. And I looked at the site again, and I said, it's clearly a pirate site. It's 100% a pirate site. She was like, no, it's not a pirate site. Otherwise, they wouldn't have it. And I couldn't convince her that it was a pirate site, no matter what. And so I brought it up with the class, and I was trying to explain to them why piracy is bad and why piracy hurts these things, and none of them would buy it. They were completely unwilling to accept that the idea that they should be able to get this stuff for free was much more important and much more dominating in their mind than the idea that piracy was somehow hurting both the people who were making this and, in a long way, themselves as consumers. And that doesn't mean they're dumb, and it doesn't mean it just means that they didn't understand the full picture. And I wonder,
it's a level of naivete.
Yeah, it is. And I'm wondering what percentage of just regular consumers at comic book conventions and in fandoms feel the same way, or are kind of unaware of these issues we're talking about, and they're perfectly happy to spend all their time, all their money at conventions buying the Deadpool print and buying the My Little Pony print, or buying what I did just last week, by the way. Let me show you this. Buying this very cute Snorlax hat that I could wear on my head. And I totally bought this, and I didn't even think about it. I bought it from this very nice woman who does very nice work, and I wore it all weekend long, and it never even frickin' occurred to me that I was supporting somebody who was violating somebody else's copyright and trademark, obviously, or that I would probably much rather have bought something from her that was her own original content. And that's actually a lie. The only reason I bought it was because it had Snorlax on it. But
it's an unconscious decision almost.
It is an unconscious decision. And I guess part of it is I think we as the consumer base want this content to a certain extent anyway. And unfortunately, it's hard to sell your original content. It's very difficult to sell your original content. It's very difficult. I often table with my friend James Bernard, and she does a comic. She does a few different comics, but one of the comics she does is called Split Screen. And it's I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it's a romantic comedy. It's not really a comedy. It's a romance comic, and it wrapped up about a year ago. She did a Kickstarter. She has a book, and it's a very nice book. And she'll bring it to conventions, and it'll sit right in the middle of her table, and she'll have some other stuff, and then she'll have some prints, and people will walk up and look at her prints of like Nintendo characters, and they'll love them, and she'll be like, if you like my prints, if you like my art, you might also like my comic, and they will always dismiss her. And it's just difficult to sell your original content. And I think especially when you have content for other products like that. When you have your fan art content, or when you're next to somebody who has fan art content, it makes it doubly hard to sell your own stuff.
Yes. So overall, I think that the cons and the bigger companies slowly cracking down, slowly walking around, and kind of just getting the word out. Even if they don't actually come to the con and specifically do it, just getting the word out, saying, guys, you need to back off. That's ours. We do have product made. They do have the T-shirts and all made and whatnot.
Right.
They don't necessarily mind that you're making it. What they're minding is you're profiting off of it.
Right.
And that's the thing. You know what? Go ahead and make your little fan comic for free and put it up online about Sherlock and Watson actually being gay.
Right.
That's cute. That's funny. Whatever. Go for it. Have fun.
Sure.
But if you start printing it, that's when you're stepping on their toes. And if they stepped up and said, hey, we need you to stop at least printing them, you know what? Be polite enough to say, you know what? You're right. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And I think that's where I am. And I think that's how that's how I would react. I wonder if that'll actually happen. And by which I mean, I wonder if when companies do start coming around to conventions and throwing down you cannot have this content here, or start coming to individual tables, or start contacting individual artists, will that actually stop artists from having that content? Will artists start selling it under the table? Will they start selling it in more clandestine ways? Or will they move on to doing other stuff?
There's always possibilities.
Yeah.
That's always out there. I mean, I actually get frequent requests because I've been doing commission work lately can you draw this character? And I usually flat out tell them, no, I cannot. I do not own the copyright to that. But I can draw my character wearing their outfit, that sort of thing.
Sure.
And whatnot. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I know we're probably in the minority, but we're also the content creators. And the more we put our foot down, the more the public either has to accept it or create their own.
No, that's true. That's true.
That's it. That's pretty much it. Like, for instance, now this is not necessarily comics, but it's still a copyright lawsuit that went through that everybody probably still remembers a couple years back. A couple of the people on Etsy that were making Jane hats from Firefly. I don't know if you remember this, but they actually got sued by Fox, who owns Firefly. I do remember that. For infringing on their copyright, because what exactly they were doing on Etsy was they were specifying these hats were Jane Cobb hats or Firefly hats.
Right.
So the court did rule that they can't legally copyright pom-pom hats. I mean, there's no way. Clothing you cannot actually copyright, but what you own the copyright of is the name Jane Cobb. Right. You own Firefly, the name Firefly. So these guys on Etsy, what they had to do was just stop naming them that. Start naming them, generic.
Sci-fi cowboy hat. That's sci-fi gunslinger hat, something like that.
Yeah, space western hat.
Right.
That sort of thing, or pom-pom hat, tricolor pom-pom hat. I mean, I've seen some different wording for it. But overall, these websites don't actually have to allow you to sell them either. If there's any form of even remote copyright infringement sniffed, you will be shut down in a heartbeat.
Right.
And so
on the other hand, I mean, that doesn't stop Etsy from being full of stuff like that at this moment.
Oh yeah. But you just have to be smart about it. But at the same time, should you even be selling it to begin with?
I think that's a good question. I mean, so the question here is, do we have a moral obligation to, And this will obviously, the answer will be different for different people. But do we have a moral obligation to not create this art to begin with? Or at least not to create this art with the intent to profit off it? Or is our moral obligation to simply accept that if somebody asks us to stop, we should stop without question?
You know, I think if you're just making it for you, you're not selling it, you're not doing any form of profit off of it, you know, I don't think they'll mind that at all. In fact, that'll encourage their brand and their overall visual stimuli out there in the community. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you should have that just a little bit in the back of your mind. If somebody asks you to stop, you should welcome their stance on it. Tell them that's fine, I'll stop.
I agree. I agree 100%. And I think that's going to be harder for some people, especially people who really are making a living doing this and making a good living even. But
again, that's short term, you know.
It is necessarily short term, yeah.
That's completely short term. I completely understand that would be a kick in the teeth. And I know plenty of people will disagree with us on this. Plenty. But overall, morally speaking, copyright speaking, legally speaking, you shouldn't be doing it.
So here's an idea, and this is not a good idea at all. And I'm not floating this as something I'd actually like to see. But I think it's interesting, and I'm curious to hear what you would think. Let's say a company like Disney, I don't think Disney would ever do this, but let's say a company like Disney said, we are going to allow fan art, but if you are making more than X amount of of money on your fan art a year, you need to give us a percentage of that, a royalty.
Then that would require a contract.
Oh yeah, that would require all kinds of stuff. At that point, do you think, would your feelings change toward people who are spending most of their time making fan art, or would that? I mean, does that make creating fan art for profit more of a job and a career, or is that still people investing time and effort into something which ultimately can't really be their own thing?
You know, I think it would be more, especially since we would get into basically having a contract with them, licensing technically the use of their copyright, then you would basically be making a career out of it legally, which is fine.
So the reason I bring this up is I heard about this on a panel I was on last year, and I don't remember the details, but there are a few different novel series which are opening up their worlds for official fan fiction, or fan fiction that people can charge for. So maybe not fan fiction anymore, as a licensing thing. So you could be I can't think of any examples here, but let's pretend. All right, let's pretend Twilight was one of these. You could be a licensed Twilight author, but you would have to kick up some percentage of your profits to the author of Twilight or whoever. And on one hand, I think that's really interesting, and on the other hand, I don't like it in any way whatsoever.
Well, that's somebody finding a way into being a cog in the system.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely it is.
And that's definitely, if that's what they definitely want, and that's their sole focus, is they only want to make that type of art forever. Mm-hmm. Okay, go for it, you know, have fun. But, and know that's perpetuating somebody else's money, somebody else's originality, that actually lessens yours.
Yeah.
In many ways, that lessens your credibility in many ways. It's not to say it completely takes away. For instance, there are plenty of artists out there that get hired to do freelance work for the big guys on this big name character or that big name character. But they have contracts already set up specifying a length of time. I'm going to do X amount of issues with them, or series run, or whatever, or just covers, you know, and that's it. You know, then you already have a contract backing you up. I mean, and it's not such a fuzzy area of, I'm just doing fan art forever, you know?
Yeah. All right. So the flip side of that is that we all can't be successful, right? I mean, there's way too many of us who want to make a living making, not necessarily comics, but making art featuring our original content, whether that's comics or animation or illustrations or prose, you know, whatever it is. And I feel like everybody is entitled to try, and everybody is entitled to as much success as they can get. And I certainly want to support and encourage anybody who wants to try that. But I feel like there's just not enough space to go around. I wish there was. And part of the reason there's not enough space to go around is there's so much corporate content out there and so much money being spent on that content, of course. But also part of the reason is because, like, for example, when I was at APE 2 weeks ago, I'm almost positive that every single sale I made was to somebody else who had a table there. And for most of the people I talked to, they were in the same boat as me. And if your sales are all coming from other creative people, that to me indicates there's just not enough money going around to support everybody's creations.
Now, do you think that's a current reflection of our current economy?
Oh, yeah. No, definitely that's a big part of it. Absolutely. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, if you and I and 100 people we know all want to make money with our original comic strips and our original comics and our original characters, the chances that 10% of us are actually going to be able to do that is really low. I mean, if I could list the 10 most successful people I know who are making a living doing that, and they're all making a living that's incredibly subpar to what you would make if you were working as a manager at Radio Shack. And I think that's why doing the kind of art we were talking about before, you know, doing the print wall, doing licensed characters has become more attractive for a lot of people who might otherwise be creating their own stuff because there just isn't any money there.
Right.
Or it's not that there isn't any money there. It's just so fucking hard to make money.
But it's also the easy way out.
It is also the easy way out. Yeah.
And that can actually, like we said, you know, hurt you in the long run. It hurts everybody in the long run. So the easy way isn't always the best way.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, and I think part of the thing is that eventually, a lot of people, eventually maybe me, eventually maybe you, eventually maybe a lot of people we know, will have to come to the conclusion that we really can't make a living doing this. And that's sad. That's fucking sad because I absolutely don't want to make a living doing anything else. And I think that has to be the reality for a very large percentage of us. And I don't think that's what any of us want, of course. I think we want to be able to make a living doing what we want to do, or at least to heavily supplement what we're doing. And I think to some extent we feel entitled to that. I certainly feel entitled to it. I don't know if that's fair. I don't know.
I think it's fair that we have the ability to pursue it. The realities of it, though, is our current economy can't support it right now. That's why there are more big fish than little fish.
Yeah. Okay. So
in our pond.
So every time I go to one of these shows, all right, last year or this year, 2015, I have a slate of shows I normally go to. I normally go to SakuraCon. I normally go to Geek Girl Con. I normally go to Emerald City Comic Con. I normally go to Rose City Comic Con, as well as a bunch of other shows. All four of the shows I went to, or all four of the shows I just listed, I did not get accepted into this year. And it's not because I haven't been accepted into them in the past. I meet whatever quality standards they have, I assume. I assume that hasn't changed. As far as I can tell, it's just because the sheer number of people applying for these tables. There's not enough tables to go around. Not everybody can get in. It's randomized. You get waitlisted, etc. I mean, you know how it is. I think there's two problems. There's a lot of problems here. Two of them that I'm really seeing, though, is that one, more and more people are flooding in to sell art featuring licensed characters because it's a quick cash grab. And two, and I can't really blame them for that. As much as I said earlier that it's hard for me to respect them, I also totally understand that. You know, if you know you can probably make anywhere from $500 to $5,000 over a weekend selling prints, it's hard to say no to that. But two, there's a lot of people who are very young creators, very new creators who want to go to a convention. And I talk to people like this all the time. They go to a convention and then I hear from them, they're like, it was the best convention ever. I sold 2 things. And I always think, the unkind part of my mind always thinks, fuck you. If I could have had that table and that would have been like 2 months worth of rent for me. But that's the unkind part of my mind. That's not really fair because they have as much right to be there as I do.
Right. Well, I think some of their screening standards at some of these specifically comic conventions needs to be a little stricter. I think they need to specify that you have to have an established comic, something printed, you know, as a book, you know, so that way you can actually prove that you are a comics person, and that way they can maybe cut down on the t-shirt and print wall people. It's not to be rude or disrespectful to them. It's that I don't think they should be dominating these cons and creating the candy coated shell. You know?
I also really don't feel like these people should be an artist alley. I feel like if what you're doing is if you're making your money on a bunch of prints or stuff like that, yes, you're an artist. You're obviously an artist. I feel like you should not be an artist alley. You should be over here. You should be paying for a vendor booth. You should be. I do feel like these conventions are just getting too expensive, and that's another barrier as well.
Yeah, they're getting exceptionally expensive.
And I feel like that's part of the reason people feel like they have to default to selling more merchandise that they know will sell, because to make up the table cost, and that's just a poisonous cycle, I think.
Yeah. Well, like for instance, there's a fairly new con in my more neck of the woods, Santa Fe Comic Con, and that's a fairly new con. Very few people have heard of it. You know, I mean, it's not big advertised, but I was looking at their price just for a basic artist alley booth, and I'm sorry, I know for a fact I could not make that money right now back.
Yeah.
With you know, travel expenses, with having to, you know, get a hotel room, all that on top, all of your overhead, you know, along with, you can't make it back. And if somebody isn't at least guaranteed to break even, what good is them even trying? Yeah,
exactly.
And that becomes a poisonous cycle as well.
Yeah, exactly. And some people don't care about breaking even. Some people are really there because they want to show off their art. They're excited to be there. They want to, and they'll tell you, you know, I made $20. I made $50. I'm so fucking excited. Somebody bought my book, and that's great. You know, they're a hobbyist. They're not ready to be trying to make money off this. They just want to go and have the experience. And I love that. And there should always be a place for people like that. And I think Artist Alley is the place for people like that. But yeah, no, but it's super frustrating when you're looking at this thing and you're thinking, I want to go to this convention in, you know, British Columbia, or I want to go to this convention in wherever, and you can't, because it's just, besides travel, I mean, even local conventions, they become so expensive to go to that it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. No, it's almost to the point where it's just not worth doing. And that's what we were talking about earlier, is, has cons become so almost poisonous in that cycle that they're not worth doing anymore?
And I think the answer is, to some extent, is yes. When I started doing Modest Medusa 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, it was after reading for my entire life about people like Jeff Smith and Colleen Doran and Mark Oakley and Dave Sim, who had established this model where you print your comic or you do your web comic, you go to conventions and you sell your book, and that's how you make your living, right? And I do okay with my books at conventions. Sometimes I do better, sometimes I do worse. But from my own experience and looking around at other people I know, and even other people I know who are much, much, much more popular than I am, whose monthly reader numbers dwarf mine by 10 or 15 times, are also not making a living doing this. I feel like it's a losing game. I feel like we can go to conventions to promote ourselves. We can go to conventions to spread word. We can go to conventions to make a little bit of money, but we're not going to be selling enough stuff to actually make a living. And I feel like maybe it's time that, or not, as some people do. There's a small amount of people who do. I feel like it's time to maybe abandon that model and start finding other ways to make a living, or to at least supplement our income and make doing this kind of work worthwhile financially. And Patreon helps with that, and other things help with that. But, you know, it's...
I think that's why online stores are just so vital, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anymore, I buy more art and print and things like that from the artists themselves directly. I go to conventions rarely now.
Sure.
I wasn't a big convention goer to begin with, just because they're so far out of the way for me where I'm at. But more and more, they're just not worth it. Even as a spectator, I went to Emerald City in 2014, and I loved it. I mean, it was fun.
It was fun,
but,
right?
Oh yeah, it was great, but it was so overcrowded.
Yes.
And it seemed like it had more of that candy-coated shell.
Yes.
And it just, the few panels I wanted to go to, they were really poo-pooed, you know? If it wasn't the big celebrity doodad that they had advertised, any of the smaller comic panels or anything about, you know, like some creators would get together and make their little panel about women in comics or whatever, you know, they didn't really get the equal press that they should have from the convention. And, you know, it's just these little things here and there that more and more have turned me off from going to cons at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I'm also a huge introvert, like huge introvert. Can we high five over that? Yeah. And because of that, going to conventions is very difficult for me. But I go to a lot of them, and I have to put on this fake mask while I'm there, of like, I don't want to say it's a business mask, and it's a business mask I learned from working retail for years, as you do when you work retail. And it's a fucking it's complete insincerity, and I don't want it to be, because I meet people and I like people, and I always appreciate it when people stop and talk to me, or God forbid buy something from me. But that's not me. I'm not that person. I'm this other person who has to pretend. And so the whole thing becomes very, very difficult for me. And it becomes that much more frustrating when I'm sitting there and I'm not actually selling anything, or I spend a bunch of money to be somewhere. Like I went to TCAF this year and I sold almost nothing. It was the worst convention sales-wise I've ever done in my life, including back before I actually had books to sell. It was stunningly bad. It was a beautifully run show. Everybody I met was fantastic. Everybody I met was friendly. The staff was great. Just somebody at every show has to do badly, and it was my turn. But that becomes such a frustrating experience. And combined with the crowds, and TCAF's a very nice show. TCAF is like a model of what you would want a comic book show to make. It's all creator focused. All the creators are really smaller people who are creating very artful stuff. But even that became a stressful experience for me.
Well, I think France, for instance, is a very good example of how cities themselves could run conventions. Angoulême is free.
Oh, okay.
Did you know that?
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah, they're actually free. It's free to the public. It's you just, you know, if you wanted to have a table there or whatever, you still have to apply, but they've got some heavy screening processes, but they still extremely, because this is part of their arts program.
That's good.
And I think several cities could actually step up and do this. You know, see if they can't, as a donation from the convention centers, as a tax write-off or whatever, you know, donate a weekend to us and let us have an arts and comics convention for the public, you know?
Right. I don't know if you posted it or somebody else posted it, but somebody posted something about a big show in somewhere here in the United States, which was just offering free tables for artists. Like if you were an artist, you did not have to pay for a table, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was amazing. And it was a relatively big name show. And I thought, holy shit, that's great. So I reposted it and I said, this would be great. This would be great if one of the local shows in Portland could do this. And everybody who responded to my post was like, why would they do that? What's the value of that? We don't see any value. Why should artists get a table for free, et cetera, et cetera? And I was trying to explain to people that it makes it easier for artists to, you know, create, to bring new content to the convention instead of just selling Deadpool prints. It makes it easier for artists to come to the convention at all. It brings a larger variety of content to the convention for everybody to enjoy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there was no awareness from the people who I was interacting with that this was valuable stuff. And again, it's not because anybody was stupid here. It's just because the thought process and the awareness of this problem is completely absent, I think, from most people who are going to conventions and enjoying stuff.
Right.
No.
I think that basically this just needs to be worked into the mentality and the lexicon. You know, again, it's more of a naivety, of an ignorance of, and you know, you can work it in there where this is an extension of the arts, and that we do have an arts council, you know, in our government.
Right.
And most cities and states actually have their own little arts committee as well. So why aren't we appealing more to them? Saying, you know what? Media is also art. Comics cross the line of being both literature and art, but they are both. And promoting both would be more of a benefit to a city than not. It would be a tourist attraction. It brings in more money in general, you know. So instead of making money off the con itself, they should be encouraging the tourist dollars in their city.
No, I agree. I really like the idea of removing.
It's removing a barrier.
It's removing a barrier. Yeah. I have a friend who refers to these shows as corporate comic book conventions, and I feel like that's more and more what they are. They are a money-making machine at the expense of everybody, including the artists who are paying for space, including the vendors, even including the celebrities that are part of it. It's just a money-making machine that does not return much for the value.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just enriching our communities. I think overall this would be more of an enrichment to everybody. You would be encouraging commerce. You'd be encouraging it's got more pros than cons.
We have this lovely little comic book cafe here in Southeast Portland called Sprightly Bean. And it's run, and I've posted about it a lot, and it's run by some friends of mine. And back last summer, they put on a small comic book festival, and they paid for it themselves. They got some local sponsors, but it was mostly out of pocket, and it was run in their parking lot. They have a very small parking lot, so it was only about, I want to say, 45 tables, and tables were dirt cheap. They were basically whatever they had to charge to pay for the space. So like, I think they were $10 each. And if you couldn't pay for it, I know they gave away a lot of tables for free. And they rented tents, so everything was covered, and it was a nice day. And it was the best comic book convention experience I've had in years. everybody who showed up, and there was fantastic attendance, like 1,000 people showed up for this tiny little one afternoon show. Everybody who showed up was enthusiastic. They wanted to know what was going on. They wanted to talk to you. They wanted to see what you made. They were interested in, you know, your crappy little autobio comics. They were interested in your sketchbook. They were interested in the stories of how you made stuff. They wanted to spend money. Often they were people from the neighborhood. Often they were just children walking up and picking up stuff that maybe they should not pick up under any circumstances. It was beautiful and it was wonderful. And months later, I still have people in the neighborhood stop me on the street and say, I remember you from that thing. That was so much fun. I really loved it. I have little kids who in the neighborhood who will slip, because my studio is right here in the neighborhood, will slip drawings of Medusa that they made under my door. And it's exactly that kind of community enrichment that I think really pays off. And that was not a giant corporate con. That was a tiny little thing that they ran in their basement with free admission, where, yeah, they did charge artists to get in, but it was the absolute minimum they had to charge in order to not lose money on the program. And it was wonderful.
To at least cover the bare bones.
Yeah. And I would love to see more of that. And we're getting a little bit more of that here in Portland. We have a nice show called Line Art, which is not really comic based, but it's illustration based. And there's a lot of comic people there. We have one or two other small things as well. And I want to see more of that. And the other nice thing about Artist Alley, the show the Sprightly Bean did, is you could look around the entire show and you might find like a Steven Universe sticker. You might find somebody who did like some Adventure Time fan art if you looked hard, but that was it.
But yeah, it was a real low quantity.
Yeah, it was like maybe 5% of the content instead of 95% of the content.
Right. Yeah. And see, that this is what I think we should all encourage in our communities. Talk to your local arts council. Talk to your local comic shops. See if you can't get a group of fellow like-minded people together and go talk to them and just petition them. Say, hey, we would, you know what? We know this season is slow for tourism. Let's drum some up for the city. Would you guys be open to doing X, Y, Z? You know, and let's get something started. I think as much as everything is downturned right now, this is the perfect opportunity to make an upturn.
Yes, 100%.
You know, you know, I'm just a small-time artist. I absolutely 100% try to focus on nothing but original work. I do the occasional bit of fan art here and there, more or less for practice, you know, and I don't sell it at all. You know, I keep it to myself. You know, I'll put it up online just to show, you know, hey, you know, I made a Wonder Woman, you know. Yeah, I've done some ink drawings of Wonder Woman or Sailor Moon, you know, because they were fun. And I do put them in my portfolio to show that I can work on licensed work. But this is my style with that licensed work. But I always leave a little note in there specifying I do not own the copyright, you know, not for sale. Yeah. You know, strictly personal. And that way I try to keep off those toes as much as possible because I try to put out there as much respect as I want back.
I think that's important.
It's one of those golden rules that everybody in society, regardless of what you believe, what culture, what religion, anything, you want respect, give respect. You want notoriety, give notoriety. You know, you know, it's just, who do you want to rub elbows with, you know? Start talking to people, you know, start putting out what you want, you know. You want to be an actor? Well, go start acting, you know. Yes, educate yourself. Yes, research, you know. But, I mean, just put out what you want. I live here in the Southwest. I live here in New Mexico, as I've specified many times. And there are far less comic-related opportunities here. But I found that actually works in my favor more, especially more recently. I was at a local Celtic festival.
Okay.
I had gone strictly to just hang out. I did not have a vendor's booth, nothing like that. I did bring a little pop-up table with me and my little chair because they had Highland games. It's a Celtic festival. It is a Scottish and Irish Celtic festival, and they really specify that. And they have the Highland games. It's actually sanctioned Highland games. They do compete. And so I brought my little pop-up table with my little chair to sit there and sketch people, you know, give myself some artistic practice, basically, as I'm having fun for the weekend and having bangers and mash and haggis and just enjoying the music and the whole event. And I kept having people come up and ask me for sketches.
Oh, that's cool.
I kept having people stop me making art to make them something, and I did make some on the side. But I specified, I only did a couple, you know, and they were just quick ones for people, you know, for just a little bit of money real fast. But I talked to somebody that was running the show on that last day, and they are completely 100% for me coming back next year with a vendor's booth. So I've got to get some little, maybe some little ash cans made, you know,
sure, with
my original work. And I do make original art as well as making comics. So I've definitely got some themed art I'll probably bring with me because, you know, you do bring what the show is themed around, you know. Right. So a comic show, I would specifically stick to comics. This is more of a Celtic Highland festival thing. So I'm definitely going to make some original art around that theme, but then I'm going to also have my comics on the side,
sure,
to sell. But it's all going to be original, you know. I'm not going to necessarily. Now I'll definitely go with some of the fairy tales and some of the theology behind the Scottish and the Irish, because they definitely blend there, and that is open ground right there.
Right.
But I don't know if most people seem to realize that too. That's actually open copyright because they're so old, and they many of them are descended from oral traditions and whatnot. That's actually open game for everybody to step into.
I think a lot of people don't realize what's open game for copyright and what isn't.
The easiest thing to do is Google it. I mean,
oh, you know, yeah, no, totally. But even then, you end up with weird situations like the Sherlock Holmes situation where the family insists that it is still their property, but most legal interpretations say it isn't. Or that's what I've read anyway. I don't know how accurate that is.
Yeah, the recent court case actually specifically ruled they lost their copyright on it.
That's interesting. See?
At least the last time I saw anything in the news about it.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to see what is in copyright and what is out of copyright and what you can take advantage of and what you can't.
Again, that's why Disney is fighting to change copyright laws, because technically Mickey Mouse and them, they're technically out of copyright.
You know, it's weird because to some extent it doesn't really bother me if those characters continue to be Disney property forever and ever and ever. And on the other hand, I totally understand why that would not necessarily be a great idea. But it would feel weird to me if all of a sudden, and just because would feel weird to me is no good reason for it not to happen. It would feel weird for me if all of a sudden I could totally legally just go out and make Mickey Mouse comics and profit off that.
Right.
That would be absolutely bizarre. And I don't know, that would take a lot of adjusting. Or if all of a sudden Superman was a public domain character.
Right.
Or Wonder Woman or Batman or Captain America. That would be interesting. Or Godzilla. Wow.
Yeah, because we're just not used to it is the thing.
Yeah, we're just not used to it, which doesn't mean it would be bad or a bad idea. It just means that we've gotten so used to the idea that if you make something, it belongs to you forever. Well, we don't even think about that. We don't even think about the individual. We think about the company. Of course it belongs to Disney. Of course it belongs to Toho. Of course it belongs to Warner Brothers. And the idea that it doesn't is alien. But we never think, that character belongs to Stan Lee. That character belongs to Steve Ditko, because it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. Although there's a good argument to be made that it should, or it should have anyway. I don't know.
Stan Lee does, own a certain percentage of his characters still, but nonetheless.
Oh, does he? Interesting. Yes, I didn't know that. I thought they were wholly owned by Marvel.
Mm-mm. At least that was part of the term negotiations he did when he signed Marvel over to first. It's, because first he backed off from Marvel, and then, but he still owned a good percentage of the properties.
Well, good for him. That was smart.
And then whenever they sold out to Disney, Disney still had to honor those original contract agreements, at least last I heard. Again, I'm a nerd and I keep up with copyright law. Sure.
Well, and good for him. I mean, it's unfortunate that a lot of people didn't get that opportunity. It's unfortunate that a lot of people who created the things that we absolutely love ended up dying poor and without any benefit of that.
Yeah.
But, good for Stan Lee that he was smart enough and in a position where he could take advantage of that.
Well, I think that copyright law as it stands is overall good. Right now, the way it's set is you own the copyright on whenever you make original general content until you die, plus 70 years of whoever you leave your estate to. So, wife, kids, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then beyond that 70 years, then it becomes public domain. They've been trying to change it where if you sell out to a corporation, or if you sign it over to a corporation, or you create a corporation, then the corporation, as long as it's the life of the corporation, owns the copyright. And that's where Disney basically becomes infinite in owning things. And that's why so many people actually fight, saying, no, it should be the life of just the original creator, not the corporation. If the corporation buys it out, that's fine, but they should still honor the original copyright up till 70 years, and then it should become open game. That's been the general black and white look, is at least that's what I've seen.
Yeah, no, that sounds accurate to me.
So, overall, copyright should remain with the original content creator. Now, the other side of things is there's nothing really original under the sun.
Yeah.
Everything's been done and redone. But because there's enough of us that can look at things and give it an original twist, it becomes original, at least to that extent.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take the idea of Harry Potter, okay? I can actually think of at least 3 stories that predate Harry Potter that the basic premise is almost identical.
Sure, right, of course. I'm not a Harry Potter fan, but that certainly doesn't devalue Harry Potter, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that she was sitting there, wringing her hands saying, I'm going to rip off, the Sword and the Stone and whatever else. It just means that that's the way things are created. She had ideas in her head. Some of them she came up with maybe independently. Others were inspired by other things. And I don't think anybody could make a reasonable case saying that, she's infringing on somebody's copyright. Although maybe somebody could, I don't know. But, but you see that stuff sometimes where somebody creates something and then somebody else comes out of the woodwork and says, I had the same idea, or that was based on a book that I wrote like 20 years ago. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, maybe, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, if there's enough general content that you can prove in a court of law or, to the general public at least, saying, this is my original book. I wrote it 10 years ago. They might have read it or they might have read excerpts from it. and it influenced them enough where they made theirs, but there are still too many points that line up.
Yeah, no, and that certainly does happen. That certainly does happen where somebody reads something or sees something and then just says, I'm going to flat out steal it, or I'm going to do something very, very, very similar, and it ends up just being too similar, and they are directly inspired by or are flat out stealing something. But like you said, there's also just nothing original, and I think a lot of times we are inspired by the same things, and because of that, our work ends up looking very, very similar. And I think that's natural. I don't think that can be avoided.
Yeah. Well, like I know some artists, for instance, they were fighting on DeviantArt, which of course is always a fun place to fight about artistic style, for instance. Sure. There's just some people that are influenced by similar things and have similar styles of drawing. And one was accusing another of completely stealing her work. Their work was similar, you know, but there were still enough differences in overall style. They did not have identical characters or anything that, I'm sorry, there were just too much difference there.
Right.
Yes. Other than your art style being similar, that's it.
Yeah.
And then there was another case of somebody else getting their art completely ripped off. And I mean,
which happens, and that happens all the time. Yeah.
But that's what cease and desist letters are for. And I always encourage everybody to, for instance, get the Graphic Artists Guild's Handbook of Pricing and Ethical Guidelines. I've actually got just edition 12. I think they have 13 or 14 out by now. But it gives some pretty basic standard contracts in it. It also has some cease and desist forms in here.
That's handy.
It's real basic, but it's got basic boilerplate in it. It lays out all the specifics for everybody. So that way it gives everybody a standard they can go by. Because as much as art, comics, and media in general are a big open space to play in, there's also still some basics you have to go by.
Yeah. Funny story. A few years ago, I was at SakuraCon up in Seattle, and I was sitting across from a young woman who had prints and, you know, stuff. And she had a print, I think it was of a Street Fighter character. It might have been something else. And I was looking at it, and I was staring at it all weekend long, and I was convinced she had ripped it off from me. I was convinced because it looked just like something I had drawn, like the same pose, which was a relatively distinct pose. And I was looking at it, and I was like, oh, fuck you, you awful little teenager.
Right.
Or for clearly having gone on my DeviantArt and seen this drawing and was like, oh, I'm just going to rip off this completely. I mean, same facial expression, same pose, same shadowing. I knew it was my piece. And I was staring at her all weekend, and she came over several times to chat, and I didn't accuse her of anything. I didn't bring it up. I wanted to. And she was very friendly, and I kept thinking, how dare you be friendly when you know you ripped me off? And you must know. Because she even said, she came up and she was like, oh, I like your comic. I've read your comic before. And I was like, that's it. That's how I know you know. Anyway, right. I went home that weekend. I pulled up the drawing. I didn't have a internet capable phone at the time. So I pulled up the drawing when I got home. I looked at it, and in the notes on the DeviantArt page was a link to the photo I had used as reference for it, which was a photo of a real person. And that's when it occurred to me she hadn't ripped me off. We had just used the same photo as reference. And I felt like such an asshole for it. Such an amazing asshole for being pissed off at this very nice young woman all weekend long for no good reason.
But you realized it afterwards.
I realized it afterwards.
You know, you did your research first. You know, it's just, you know, it's better to hold your tongue and absolutely 100% make certain before you stick your foot in it.
And that's what I was waiting for. I was waiting to get home so I could check it out, because I knew I wasn't imagining it, but some part of my brain was like, no, it's not really the same drawing. you're misremembering your own art, which I never do, ever. But, yeah.
Yeah, it was just you had used reference, and that's what it is.
That's exactly what it is. And we both used the reference maybe too well. Maybe we didn't embellish on it enough because it was super recognizable.
Right.
Yeah.
Which happens.
Yeah.
I mean, and there is absolutely nothing against using reference, guys.
No, oh my God. I was what is the name of the artist? He was drawing X-Men until relatively recently. He did Next Wave with Grant Morrison.
Oh, damn.
Anyway,
Google search.
that guy. So I read a post he made on 4chan once, where or somebody who was claiming to be him anyway, where apparently there were a bunch of people complaining on 4chan that anybody who used reference was obviously just a cheater and was cheating. And so he went on and he explained how, no, you use reference all the time. Every artist uses reference. Reference is not cheating. Reference is how we know what things look like. If you claim that you're not using reference, you're either lying or you are probably an awful artist, or you're just the best fucking artist who ever lived. One of those options.
Right.
And he just got shouted down. He just got shouted down by all these people who were like, no, you're a cheater. You're a fucking cheater because using reference is cheating. And these were people who
clearly never made art.
Clearly never made art. And I think that was the first time I realized that there are a large number of people the majority of people who consume art and consume the kind of art we make do not understand how it's made, for good reasons. I mean, they don't make it. I don't understand how computers are made. They don't understand how it's made. They don't understand what goes into it. They don't understand the expenses of it, the time commitment of it, the skill commitment of it, the tools we use. They don't understand any of this, much in the same way we don't understand how drafts are made, or what it takes to be a plumber. Or maybe you do. I don't. And that's not unreasonable. But the problem with that is that, especially in the society we live in, where people like to be giant fucking assholes at every opportunity, you get people who say, well, you don't have a right to, how dare you ask for money for a commission? How dare you have this entitled idea that you should be able to go to a convention and make money? How dare you start a Kickstarter? How dare you have a GoFundMe campaign? How dare you have a Patreon? And that's really poisonous stuff, because these are the same people who want your content. They want what you're making, but they don't understand that in order for that to happen, you can't just give it to them for free. Or you can give it to them for free, but you have to be making money somehow, or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, they just don't see the business side of things. Yes. They only see their side.
Exactly.
It's a very narrow-minded idea.
It is. And these are the same people. These are not necessarily the same people. I don't want to cast these as just like one group of awful people. But you'll be at a convention and somebody will come up to your table and they'll be like, oh, what do you have here? And you start to explain it to them, and then the My Little Pony art at the table next to you, or the Steven Universe art at the other table, will catch their eye, and they'll just walk away from you to buy that stuff. And then they'll come back over with their big stack of Deadpool prints or My Little Pony art or whatever, and they'll be like, now tell me what you have. And they'll tell you, and you'll tell them, and they'll go, oh, that's nice. Well, I can't afford to buy any of that because I bought all this. And that's totally preference. Obviously, they should buy whatever they want to buy, but it makes it difficult. It makes it difficult, and what you end up with, I think, is conventions that are a wasteland of no original content.
The candy coated shell.
Yes, exactly.
More and more the conventions that I see catering more and more to the pop culture side, I run away from.
Sure.
It's not to be rude or disrespectful. They are more than welcome to go to that con, but I specifically want to go to a comic convention.
And I think and I think some people do want exactly that. They the candy coated shell. They do want the celebrities, and they want to buy those little statues with the big heads.
Yeah, the Funko.
Yeah. And right, and they want to buy their print of Deadpool and their My Little Pony hoodie, and that's what they want. They want to buy the T-shirt with Link getting really pissed off because everybody's calling him Zelda, and that's their thing. But I feel like when that's all the convention offers, it just becomes a hollow experience. And I feel like and I know I said this like 9 times already. I feel like it's a self-destructive thing. I feel like we're reaching a peak of where I think people are starting to go to these conventions and pay $40 or $50 or $60 or $70 to get in, and they're not really getting anything for their money. They're getting very little for their money, and they're becoming more frustrated. They're not coming back, and I don't think it's sustainable.
Yeah.
And I think what will be sustainable is shows that focus on creators, and they can have some of that stuff as well. I mean, I think a mix is nice, but shows that focus on content and focus on creators. Even if for some shows that content is more general media based. I mean, not every show is going to care about people like us, and that's fine.
But they should actually market it that way.
They should actually market it that way. Yeah. Yeah. Because the illusion that this is a comic book convention, but what it actually is 4 wrestlers and 5 celebrities from shows that were on 20 years ago. And then a bunch of people selling Walking Dead merchandise, and that's it. Yeah.
It becomes very tiresome. I don't want to spend my money there.
Yeah.
So I go directly to the creators anymore, and I buy directly from them.
Yeah.
That's
like,
lost revenue on their part.
Yeah. I would like to see a movement for that to become more viable. I would like to see a movement for people spending. Because every time I go to a show, people say, people run out of money, or people just don't want to buy something from you. And they say, can I buy this online? And I say, yes. And I give them my card. And invariably after the show, I do get 1 or 2 sales from the show on my store. But that's 1 or 2 sales compared to the 40 or 50 or 100 people who ask me if I have a store. Right. And some of those people are just lying. Some people just don't want to, and some of them are being polite, and some of them forget, and that's all fine. And some of them, don't have the money, and et cetera, et cetera. But I would like to see a movement of instead of forcing creators to go to this convention, let's support them by buying their stuff. Instead of forcing creators to go to this convention, let's support them by supporting their Patreon, by supporting their Kickstarter, or if we don't want to support them, because obviously just supporting somebody for the sake of supporting somebody is not something any of us are entitled to, then let's find a fair exchange where we can give these people money for things we actually want, whether that's through a store or through some other service. That's what I would like to
something.
That's what I would like to see more of, and I would like to see more of an acceptance and an acknowledgement that that's how smaller artists survive, and not even smaller artists, but we're talking about like Aaron Diaz, for example. And I don't know this for sure, but every time I've heard him talk about it, he had talked about how he was having to sell T-shirts and stuff constantly to make a living. And that once he started his Patreon, he was able to give up the sell T-shirts to make a living model, and that freed him up to spend more time actually making his comic. And the sell T-shirts to make a living model is viable. That was definitely working for him, and I would like to see that work for more people as well. But I would also like to see more people just accepting that if you're making something that you like, that they like, that it is worth supporting for that reason.
Yeah, exactly. I think being more community minded as artists, once you become established, I say start stepping up to the plate. Like I said, here in the Southwest, I don't have a whole lot of comics related venues. So this is why I started going to the Celtic Festival. This is why I start branching out to the different artist venues and stuff. There's more than one venue you could step your foot in. Just open your eyes to it.
And I think you have to build your own community, and you have to build your own fandom.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about your just your local neighborhood there. You know, you still get kids dropping off fan art, even though it's been a couple years now since that last little convention due. Which you should probably talk to them over there at the Sprightly Bean and see if you can't do again.
I think they're planning on doing another one soon.
That's nice. That's really nice.
It is, yeah. I was pretty in the beginning, and still now, I was pretty aggressive about finding other places to promote, other places to visit. Local anime conventions, local video game conventions, science fiction conventions. Those are all obvious stuff, but also like street fairs, anything like that, anything where you can actually talk to people.
Yeah, and it's within reason. That's the thing. I've got a couple of local little, fairs, just basic fairs and stuff. Some of them are ridiculous, and I will never set foot in. Because I just looked at them and went, no. Some of them are just giant yard sales, and again, no.
Yeah.
So you need to go ahead and do your research. You need to go ahead and get out there and look at things. I stick on the local level just because it is more monetarily viable. I eventually want to do some. Maybe something someplace else, but right now I'm still pretty small.
Sure.
I'm just in my first year. January here, I'll be through year 1.
Congratulations!
Yay! And that's coming up here pretty quick, so that's awesome. But at the same time, I've got maybe 100 people that know about my comics. And that's okay for now.
No, and that's a fantastic start for your first year, by the way.
Is it?
It is. I believe it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to base that on, but that seems like a really good start to me.
I get on average about 1,000 unique hits on my website. But I have at least 100 loyal followers that I know been sharing my stuff and things like that, including my mom. Yes, my mom shares because let's face it, this is the digital age of putting things on the fridge.
That's good. I have a friend several friends who always complain that their Patreons or their Kickstarters aren't successful because their mothers or their fathers always contribute to them. And especially with Patreon, I always say, no, stupid. That's how it should be. Your Patreon is there for people who love you and care about you and want to support you to give you that support. It does not matter if it's your mother, and if your mother is giving you half, if your Patreon is $50 and $25 of it comes from your mother, that's not a defeat. That doesn't mean it's a fake $25. It means that somebody cares about you and wants to support your art, and that's invaluable, even if it is just your mother.
Yeah. I mean, that's where you start, is your mom and your dad, your family.
Yeah,
that's where you always start, and as long as you keep that base too.
Well, and that's somebody who loves you saying, "I believe in you. Go make art." And I mean, what's better than that?
Exactly. My mom's been bugging me lately because I wanted to start posting twice a week because I usually only post once a week, and she wants me to start posting twice a week because she wants to read more.
Oh, good. That's always what you want to hear from your readers, even if it's your mother.
Even if it's your mom, moms are the best. I'm sorry, it is. Moms are the best, definitely. Thanks, Mom.
I don't think my mom's going to hear this, but yes, thank you, Mom, as well. She just moved out of town, and I don't think she has an internet connection yet. So,
internet connection is lifeblood.
Yes. I think it's probably going to be a while till she gets her set up, though. Never mind. I was just about to say something cruel about my mom on the internet, but even if I don't think she's going to hear this, I don't want to say it.
Naughty.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this up. We've talked pretty good about this. If anybody has any questions, comments, or anything, you can comment below here on YouTube in the comments. Email is thetradecomicpodcast@gmail.com if you want to email them in. Or you can Twitter us. My personal one is Melony_C. Jake, what's yours?
I actually have no idea. It's probably Modest Medusa something.
Uh,
I literally don't know. Oh wait, I can look, can't I?
yes,
Right.
yes, you can. You can actually look. The just Google, guys. You could Google my name, Melony Chitwood, or you can Google the Trade Comic Podcast. It's all there. Our Twitter is the Trade Comic Podcast as well. So if you've got any questions, if you want us to cover any other topics, or if you want to respond, go right ahead, guys. We'll read them out online on the air here, and leave us a little reference. Or if you don't, kind of maybe underline that, so let us know that you don't want it read out loud. But overall, the response I've gotten back on the podcast here has been very nice. Most everybody wants to know what kind of tools we're using and whatnot, because that's always a big thing. And the thing about using tools is just getting comfortable with which ones, with trying a bunch out and then getting comfortable with a couple.
Should we talk about tools for like 30 seconds real quick?
Sure.
Okay. I just want to say what I'm using right now. I'm doing all my line art on paper still, because that's the kind of person I am. And I draw using a blue pencil and just normal Micron pens. I then scan into Paint Tool Sci, where I do all my paint or all my color work, and then I do all my lettering in Photoshop. Yeah.
See, right now I'm getting the hang of Manga Studio, so I'm not doing comics in it just yet, just because I'm still working out the kinks in that. So for now, I stick with paper as well.
Ooh,
at least for my line art. For my line art and whatnot, I use. I actually found these really cool Prismacolor started putting out pens.
Oh, I love those. Yeah, no, those are fantastic.
And I've been using mainly their chisel and their brush pens. Because the line quality, at least with my scanner, I can't do fine lines. It just will not pick them up, no matter how high quality scan I do. So I found a brush pen or a chisel brush gives it a thick enough line that it picks it up really well.
What kind of? Oh, go on.
And I've been usually scanning it into Photoshop CS3.
What kind of scanner do you use?
It's an Epson.
Okay, it's an Epson as well. I have an Epson something. I'm going to look.
Yeah, let me look real quick, see which number it is.
I have no idea. Mine says Epson Perfection V33.
Mine's an Epson Perfection 3490.
Okay, wow. I think we have really similar scanners. That's weird, because mine scans in beautiful detail. I never have any problems with it.
Yeah, I've been doing it at like 600 DPI, and any of the finer lines, if I do anything below a 5,
really?
It'll lose it. It loses the definition. And I've tried it in grayscale. I've tried it in black and white. I've tried it in color, and it just loses it. So I don't know. Maybe it's the software with the hardware.
Maybe. I guess that's maybe a good excuse to start drawing digitally, though.
Yeah. But this is what I've been doing for all of October here, if anybody wants to know. I've been putting up some of this on Twitter. I've been doing Inktober. And I've been using Manga Studio to get myself more accustomed to drawing in it and using it. So I put up a daily picture. And I've been doing all Halloween themed stuff. I've been using the list off of Drawloween, in fact, since somebody does that yearly Drawloween list. So I used Drawloween 2015's list for my Inktober list, and to get myself more acquainted with Manga Studio, and I think it's turning out pretty well. If anybody wants to see that, it's on my Tumblr, Steam and Nonsense. Excuse me. All right. Anyways, I think we need to wrap it up from here. I'm about to have a coughing fit.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Oh no, totally. I'm glad I was finally able to come back after like a full year of being away, I think.
Yeah. It's just things conspire. It's what happens. That's
Mhm.
why we've got such a large group of friends we can circulate through and hang out. All right, guys. Well, thanks for stopping by. This was episode 34 of The Trade, making comics for web and print. I was your host, Melony of Ornamental at ornamentalcomic.com. And my co-host today was Jake of modestmedusa.com.
Thanks for listening.
See you guys later. Bye.
Goodbye.